just keeps going up, Monica.
Good evening. I'm Monica Reedus, president of the Democratic Women's Club of Florida. I want to thank all of you, members and guests, to what I feel will be one of the most impactful DWCF training webinars our training committee has provided this year. To say this subject material is meaningful is an understatement. We have more than 200 members that have registered for this event this evening. Thank you to our chair, Maureen McKenna, and to our phenomenal training committee members for keeping your fingers on the pulse of what's going on with our members, what they want to hear, what they want to have delivered. And you delivered more than a dozen powerful workshops and seminars this year. Your training modules have been fantastic, and I think that you deserve the kudos, and we appreciate the work that you do so much. Before I introduce the training committee chair, Dr. McKenna, I want to also ask everyone to please, please, please consider the timing and importance of this information that we're going to receive this evening. We're a little more than 7 weeks away from Election Day, and less than that for vote by mail ballots to be distributed and for early voting. Please take this training and put it to good use. Unfortunately, Florida's majority party has given us much to talk about, which is why this is very, very important, because Floridians are not aware of what's going on in Tallahassee and the dire circumstances that we are looking at. Over these next weeks, we will write letters to the editor, send opinion pieces to all the mediums around the state, newspapers, community newsletters, anywhere you can access a large number of people, Dems, MPAs, and Republicans. We need to share the truth without spin, where people can read it, digest it on their own terms, in their own space, wherever they are. This is now how we will touch hearts and minds and hopefully get folks out to the polls. Again, I want to thank you so very much for attending this evening. And I want to kick this over to our training committee chair, Dr. Maureen McKenna, for her good words. Thank you, Dr. McKenna.
Thank you, President Reedus. I am going to be introducing Steve Bousquet. I'd like to welcome all the DWCF members to this webinar. We will be holding all questions to the presenter to the end of the webinar. At that time, I will look under the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen for questions that attendees may have for Steve. The Q&A tab is located at the bottom of your screen to ask your questions. Steve Bousquet is opinion editor of the South Florida Sun Sentinel and a columnist for the Sun Sentinel newspaper, as well as for the Orlando Sentinel. He has a master's degree in U.S. history from Florida State University. Steve has been a journalist in Florida for 4 decades, first as a reporter for WPLG Channel 10 in Miami, and then for the Miami Herald and the Tampa Bay Times. He joined the Sun Sentinel staff in 2018. He has covered 7 Florida governors: Bob Graham, Bob Martinez, Lawton Chiles, Jeb Bush, Charlie Crist, Rick Scott, and our current governor. DWCF feels confident Steve will be reporting on Charlie Crist's next term as governor of the great state of Florida. Steve, I'm honored at this time to turn the webinar over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Maureen. And thanks to all the members of your club for inviting me here this evening. It's a great honor. I welcome your comments, your questions, your criticisms for sure. I can talk about the state of journalism in Florida. I'm certain you want to talk about the state of Democratic politics and what's on the ballot on November 8th, and how truly important, cataclysmic this election is in the state of Florida in the history of our state. Maureen asked me to begin with I guess you'd say a brief tutorial on op-eds and letters to the editor. What makes a good op-ed? What makes a good letter to the editor? It's surprisingly simple, but I'll go through it briefly and I'll answer any of your questions and concerns. I personally edit most of the letters to the editor that run in the Sun Sentinel, and we get a lot of them. Our readership is generally in Broward and Palm Beach counties. but we get letters to the editor from Connecticut, from California, from Missouri, from the Southwest coast. People lived in, they lived in Fort Lauderdale for 20 years, and they've moved over to Estero on the Southwest coast, but they still read the Sun Sentinel. I'm gratified by that. And so they, we want to hear from people's opinions very much. A good letter to the editor should be 150 to 200 words, no longer than that. We'll still publish it, but we'll probably edit it, and we'll edit it very judiciously because, our philosophy, as it is at most newspapers, is the letters to the editor part of the opinion page, that belongs to the readers. Yes, we edit it. Yes, we have the final say over publication, but it's your newspaper too. And so letters to the editor should be opinionated, but they should not be filled with personal invective. The times we live in are such that there's a lot more of that in the political bloodstream everywhere. And strongly held opinions, yes. Personal attacks, not so much. It's hard to separate the two sometimes. I'll just mention as an aside, I mean, this is a fact. Some people don't believe me, but I have no reason to shade the truth. We have a fairly liberal readership. Most of our readers are in Broward and Palm Beach County. You know the demographics of Broward and Palm Beach. And so who's reading the Sun Sentinel in those two counties? I'm going to generalize because I don't have market research data at my fingertips, but I think I know my readers and I know these communities very well. The people who read our newspaper are politically engaged, politically active. They want to know what's going on, not just in their community, but all over the country and the world. And so they're highly opinionated. I like that. And the letters to the editor we get tend to be people from a liberal or progressive point of view. And so because I would say for every letter we get from a Democrat leaning reader, for every letter we get from a Republican leading reader, we probably get at least a dozen letters from Democratic leading readers. So what I feel that what we publish should be a fair representation of that ratio, and it is. And so on a fairly constant basis, I'm vilified by a handful of readers for how come all the letters are from people who like Joe Biden and hate Donald Trump? How come all the letters you run are people criticizing Ron DeSantis? Well, the short answer is that that's the overwhelming trend line in the letters we get. I can't make Republicans write letters to the editor. We've got quite a few Republican readers, but it is what it is. So it's more interesting to me. I think it's more interesting to readers when there's a well-informed, well-reasoned argument on all sides of the political spectrum. We're not out there to indoctrinate or to just only promote one way of thinking. This is a highly competitive state with a history of close elections. I know that there's a feeling among both Democrats and Republicans that the state is trending further Republican. But we're going to find out in about 7.5 or 8 weeks how true that is with these two big marquee races for U.S. Senate and for governor. So surprisingly enough, some of the most effective letters to the editor are one sentence, two sentences. You get right to the point. The faster you make your point, the more effective it is. You don't need to keep making the same point over and over again. Once you've made it, you've made it. If you send us a letter to the editor, and it is for us, it's letters@sunsentinel.com. Sun Sentinel, no hyphen, no dash, all one word. letters@sunsentinel.com. If we get a letter from you on Monday, the topicality of it, how topical it is, how much it's related to what's in the news that day is important. We'll try to get the letter in by Wednesday. Sometimes it'll be Thursday. Sometimes it might not be till the weekend. We greatly appreciate getting letters to the editor on all sorts of topics. We got a letter to the editor from a woman in Lauderdale by the Sea that I edited and published today, who's upset because her local town council has not yet passed an ordinance to restrict smoking on city parks and beaches. The legislature, after many years of discussing it, the legislature this year for the first time said cities and towns in Florida, you can restrict smoking on public beaches. Again, maybe it's a topic for another day, but because of the restrictions the legislature has placed on home rule powers, your community where you live and pay property taxes shouldn't need permission from the legislature to do that. They should be able to do that on their own. But anyway, they got it now. And that's an example of something that's not related to the current political election campaign, but it's an important quality of life issue to a lot of people. We get letters to the editor on traffic, on property insurance, slipshod repair people, contractors. Get letters to the editor from people who think that Florida is overpopulated. Lots of letters on the environment, letters on capital punishment. Because we're in Broward County, lots of letters on the whole incredibly difficult ordeal that the community is going through with Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland shooter, who's on trial now for the murders at the school. People who like Charlie Crist, people who don't like Charlie Crist, people who like Ron DeSantis, people who don't like Ron DeSantis, and on and on and on. So, the more the merrier, and the more variety, the better it is. A few words about an op-ed and what is an op-ed and how does an op-ed differ from a letter to the editor. Op-ed, so it's a funny term. It's been around newspapers for a million years. What does that mean? Op-ed, OP-ED. It's newspaper shorthand for opposite the editorial page. That's what it means. It's because in the newspapers you read growing up and may still read, the opinion pages were generally 2 pages. On the left side were editorials, letters to the editor, maybe a cartoon. On the right-hand side, op-eds and columns. So if you wanted to read George Will, you want to read, Eugene Robinson of the Washington Post, you want to read Thomas Friedman, his work, their work, Gail Collins, is generally on the right-hand side. Because of space constraints and other reasons that I can go into later, opinion content is generally now on 1 printed page in the newspaper. But we still run op-eds in the Sun Sentinel every day of the week. And on Wednesday, I think it is, we run 2. And we're grateful to have them. I think an op-ed is a little bit more difficult and more challenging to write, but it's probably more rewarding too, because you get to write between 600 and 800 words, which is about the length of a column, longer than most editorials. It should be in the form of an essay on a topic entirely of your choosing. You have a lot more freedom in writing an op-ed, and the same sort of general rules apply. You say something and it's your opinion, we respect it, but be prepared to back it up. If you say that Florida leads the United States in bankruptcies, you need to give us some showing of where you got that information from. So op-eds are we love getting op-eds from individuals, private people. You can speak on behalf of an organization or just speak on behalf of yourself. And again, the more varied the topic, the better it is. We get, frankly, quite a few op-eds that are submitted on topics that are submitted by interest groups, businesses, people on the left side of the political spectrum, people on the right side of the political spectrum. We publish both. We're ecumenical about that. We're not trying to, we're not trying to influence how people think, other than to make people well informed, and to, again, to be a forum for as many, the greatest breadth of views possible. I wish, frankly, we got more op-eds from young people. We'll occasionally get an op-ed from a college student, from a high school student, on some important topical issue. So, and those two are edited generally 2 or 3 days in advance, fact-checked before they're published. We've just published a couple of op-eds in the Sun Sentinel on a topic that's has a lot of people concerned and troubled, and that is, there's been a long-running controversy with the quality of the animal control, the animal care programs in Broward County. Stray dogs, stray cats. We know that's important to readers, so that's important to us too. We are a local, regional, and state newspaper, and so if a person wants to write an op-ed on the Federal Reserve, or about Israel, or about climate change, we're happy to have it. But if I had to say, I think we have a slight preference for topics that are of interest and are closer to home for more of our readers, and that is issues that matter to Floridians particularly. Can't think of an issue, the issues that come immediately to mind are property insurance, abortion rights, guns. Those issues are very much in the conversation in this election campaign. And so people want to read about that topic and want to hear more about it. I think you all know we've gotten to a point in this country where people turn to the mass media for a validation of opinions they already hold. I wish that were not the case a lot of times, because it didn't used to be that way in this country. And people would be open-minded about other points of view. They may not agree, but they want to hear the reasoning, the rationale about why somebody felt the way they did about an issue they felt strongly about. So having said that, though, I think that we all benefit from a multitude of opinions on as many issues as possible. So we would love to have op-eds from you. We do not we welcome submissions from people no matter where they live in the state. I think people naturally are going to write a letter to the editor to their hometown newspaper. That's the newspaper they subscribe to. So that certainly makes sense to me. But we welcome submissions from any place in the state and beyond. So Maureen, I hope I've given sort of a general overview of things, and I don't know if there are any questions in the queue, but I'm ready to start answering questions if you have any.
I have a question from Roxanne Hassett from Palm Beach. She's lived there 44 years and has moved to Flagler County 3 years ago. She wrote a letter to the editor to submit to a Daytona newspaper. If it's not published within a month, may I send it to the Sun Sentinel, she asks.
By all means, and let me say a word about that. We don't publish every letter we get, and there's lots of reasons for that. I mean, and I'm going to be completely, I will be completely transparent with all of you. There's no other way. Some letters are on a topic that has been opined to death by other readers. We get lots and lots of We are being inundated now, but it's a topic. It is the number one topic on people's minds, at least for our readers. We're being inundated with letters on the whole issue of the decision that was made by the governor to charter those planes, go to Texas, pick up those migrants, and take those migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Now, many of the letters take a similar point of view, but we're going to, that's what's on the minds of our readers, and that's what we're going to put in the letters to the editor page. It shouldn't take a month for any newspaper to give you a yes or no about your letter, because chances are what you've written has sort of lost its moment. Most people are motivated to write a letter to the editor about something that was in the news right at the moment they wrote the letter. Again, I emphasize, it doesn't have to be. You don't like speed bumps and you've got an alternative or a better idea than speed bumps in your neighborhood? Tell us about it. Anything that affects your quality of life is of interest to us. Anything. We miss a lot of stories. We dig into as many things as we can, but we're not clairvoyant about everything. And so that's important. Some letters are just, a screed with really no factual basis, to support what the person is saying. And so we don't have unlimited amounts of time to ask people to fact check something they're saying. Got a letter to the editor from someone yesterday who had a number of statistics in the letter about the number of people who've died from COVID-19 in Florida compared to other states. Person was highly opinionated about the governor, about the handling of the COVID epidemic in Florida. And we checked and double checked and triple checked all of the numbers in that letter against what's on the CDC website and elsewhere. So, it's kind of a fine line, because you are entitled to your opinion, but the old expression, you're not entitled to your own set of facts. So go ahead, Maureen.
This goes right into it. Ingrid, UTAC asks, I live in a very mega Republican county. Our newspaper publishes every letter submitted to it, factual or fictional, rational or emotional. There is no editing of the letters. What is your opinion of this approach?
Well, no, I don't think any newspaper is serving its readers well by, in effect, surrendering independent editorial judgment. I had to talk to my my newspaper's legal counsel about 2 weeks ago on a very well-intentioned letter to the editor. This, again, is not something that's inherently political. A reader, an elderly woman in Wilton Manors near Fort Lauderdale, had a terrible experience with a local business and basically said she had been ripped off, and said that she had property that was stolen. And we kind of vetted and went through all of her claims and decided in the end not to publish her letter. She was really making unfounded accusations that that we couldn't prove or disprove, and so it was very murky. But no newspaper should be sort of an empty vessel for anything anybody sends in over the transom. I have that conversation with our readers from time to time. Hey, if I send you a letter to the editor, are you going to censor it? Censor it? No, we're not in the censorship business. We are, though, in the business of responsible journalism. And so, and I understand that that's in the eye of the beholder to some people. A person writes a letter to the editor and says, Joe Biden is incompetent. And here's why. 1, 2, 3, 4. That point of view may not be consistent with the editorial position of the Sun Sentinel, but I'll publish that letter to the editor if the person backs up what they're saying with matters that in that reader's opinion, have some justification. No president does everything right or everything wrong. So it would not be right for us to only publish letters to the editor that we editorially agree with. That's, again, I emphasize, and this goes to the Daytona Beach paper and the paper that the questioner just asked about, that that part of the newspaper is sort of the reader's province. But having said that, we should not, no responsible newspaper should surrender, responsible editing and news judgment. And an opinion should be backed up by something.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Bruce. If you don't publish a letter or op-ed, will the writer be so informed quickly? And is there any feedback provided about why it wasn't published?
We try as often as we can. That's a very good question, and I appreciate the questioner. We try as best as we can to do that. We get way more letters every day than we can publish. What I do is I cannot do it with every letter, but if a letter comes, and I am reading letters morning, noon, and night, 7 days a week. I find it fascinating. I think it's a good window into what people are thinking. If somebody writes something that is provocative, that is really interesting, that I know readers would want to read, I will immediately reach out to that reader and say, thank you for your letter. And however, I've got a couple of questions about these 2 points. Can you elaborate on these 2 points in particular? I just want to quiet my phone there. And can you amplify those points? It'll make for a better letter. I can't always personally respond to every letter writer about why we don't publish their letter. We have a policy, as most newspapers do, and frankly, I'm not watching the clock, but our policy is that we would publish a letter from a reader once a month, once every 30 days. But are we marking the days off on a calendar? No, but I know from memory, I know who's writing to us and where they're from. And some days you'll see in the Sun Sentinel, every letter is on the same topic, and hopefully with a range of opinions on that topic. Other days, the letters, and we publish between 4 and 6 letters a day. That's pretty much what it is at most newspapers. It used to be more, but it's still 4 to 6 letters, and people really are good letter writers, most people. Some days it's 4 to 6 letters on 4 to 6 different topics. I think variety is really important. I feel we've succeeded. I've succeeded. If somebody reads a letter, a well-reasoned letter, and they look at the letter and think, hey, you know what? I never quite looked at it that way before. I think that's really an interesting point of view that's got me sort of second guessing why I feel the way I do about some issue. So that's my thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Elaine Goldman. I've written letters about current events. My last letter was about the fact that hate is so intertwined in our society. You said to share the truth without spin. How can I share the truth about the inhumanity shared by most Republicans?
Write from the heart, write what you believe, back it up with examples, 1 or 2. It's a matter of opinion. That's what makes it interesting. It's your opinion. Chances are a letter on that topic would get published in our newspaper. It's a recurring theme on our letters page from our readers. People are gravely worried about the future of democracy. We have a letter to the editor from a man in Boca Raton that I just edited. The letter stopped me cold. And I read it and reread it and read it 4 or 5 times. And he's written to us many times before. But this gentleman feels that depending upon how things go in this election in November, democracy as we know it could end in this country. It's the most horrifying thought imaginable, really. And I thought, whether I agree or disagree with his point of view, or maybe think he's overstating the case, first of all, I don't know. Secondly, that's not the point. This person has spent some time and effort making a case, building a case for why he feels the way he does. And that letter is the first letter to the editor in the paper. I lose track of the days. It's Monday or Tuesday. Nobody has asked this question yet, but I wanted to just quickly digress, Maureen, because people think, how come so-and-so's letter ran first and why did my letter run third or fourth? It's a judgment we make. I am going to, I don't once in a great, I'd say about once every month, I'll get a letter to the editor from somebody that I know personally in my many, many years of covering politics in Florida and in South Florida. But that really has no bearing on anything. The point I'm making is I don't personally know the people that are writing the letters to the editor. I'd like to know them personally. I've got a point to make about that in a minute. Sometimes a letter to the editor is so interesting that it's the underpinning of a really good news story. And I'll give you an example in a minute of that very point. But what's chosen as the first letter to the editor is something that's on a really serious topic that maybe stretches across all aspects of the political spectrum. That is something that I think will engage the greatest number of readers possible. And so this gentleman who was talking about the future of democracy, I know that subject's on the minds of a lot of our readers, and it's a topic of great concern and anxiety among people. And I wanted to give this reader and his point of view a big a forum as I could.
Okay, thank you. Deanna Albert, do you typically advise the editorial writer that their submission was accepted, as I wrote one in June and didn't know it was published, but found out from my sister who happened to see it, and it was an excerpt of what I submitted. Certainly glad it was published even as an excerpt. Understand it was wordier than it should have been, and now learning the difference in the number of words between an op-ed and a letter to the editor. So in future, I will keep that criteria in mind. Do I have a better chance of getting something published if I submit an individual, or am I better off submitting as part of a group, i.e. chair of the education committee of the Palm Beach CDP?
Oh, well, there's some very good questions in there. And you didn't say specifically it was the Sun Sentinel, but I'll assume it was us. And so it is our goal to judiciously edit what someone submits, but not to run only an excerpt of what somebody published. But I want to emphasize that an op-ed should be between 600 and 750 words. You can say a heck of a lot in 750 words. The Gettysburg Address wasn't much longer than that, okay? And so if you send in, by the way, and I'm sorry if I sound like a English teacher or a journalism teacher here, but something that's 1,200 words isn't necessarily twice as good as something that's 600 words. That's not how it works. Brevity is to be admired and respected and revered. Readers have limited amounts of time, and readers want to read about the stock market. They want to read about how the Tampa Bay Bucks did. They want to read about the weather. They want to read about that terrible flood in Alaska or what happened in Kentucky. And so you've got a multitude of topics competing for precious time that readers have to read. And so we're well aware of that. And so I want to say to the questioner that to the question of, is it better to submit something as an individual or on behalf of an organization? It really doesn't make much difference. I don't think it does. What makes a difference is the power of the argument and whether there's something really new and fresh about it that you're saying. I'm trying to think of a really good example of something recently, and nothing is coming to mind, but somebody will write to us about the current movement underway to empower, Republicans would say, the effort to empower parents to have more of a say in their children's education. Nobody's against that. Everybody's in favor of that. But when it gets to the subject of deciding what books can be on the shelves in elementary school or middle school, now it's getting into a very sensitive area. And, a fresh approach to the issue of, who decides, who should decide whether my 5th grader or my 7th grader can read To Kill a Mockingbird or not, and how that decision should be made. So a new approach to an old issue is really welcomed and prized, but I would say no, it doesn't really matter whether you're writing as an individual or on behalf of an organization.
Thank you. Teresa Jenkins asks, is it effective to write a letter that calls out and corrects a letter to the editor that contained misinformation?
Thank you so much for that question, Teresa, because those brickbats have been hurled my way more than once, and rightfully so. My answer to that is yes, it is. I don't want to engage into it. We're all old enough and been around long enough that we've probably listened to more than our share of talk radio, and in a limited sense, the letters to the editor are a little bit like talk radio. And one of the things you want to avoid in talk radio is a redundancy of the same opinion expressed over and over again. And you want to try to avoid what people in radio, and I have worked many years in both radio and television in my prior life. And the term in radio stations is chronics. Chronics are people who have a chronic need to call a talk radio program every day. Ralph, you called yesterday. Ralph, you called on Friday, making the same argument. We want to hear fresh voices, new people. Even if the argument isn't new, we'd like to hear it from as many new people as possible. Is it okay to call out another letter writer for misinformation? My answer to that question is yes, it is. It's important. Again, this is not a science. There's a fine line between expressing an opinion and sliding into demagoguery and baseless accusations against someone that you shouldn't be allowed to just say in a newspaper without some factual basis. So it's not always easy. Occasionally someone will say, how could the Sun Sentinel let that person's opinion go in the newspaper like that? I just edited some letters to the editor on the issue of the like we talked about earlier, the flights to Martha's Vineyard. Most of the people writing to the Sun Sentinel are Democrats or have a point of view, regardless of their party affiliation. They think this was wrong. They're highly critical of it. We get letters from readers, not many, but we get letters from readers who think, you know what, DeSantis has done the right thing. He should be doing more of this. Send them all back. One letter writer wrote to me, quote, send them all back to Texas. That's what he said. He signed his name. He signed his city of residence. I'm publishing that. We are publishing that letter. You may not like that point of view. You may not agree with that point of view. There are people in the community who feel that way, whether the majority of people in Broward County like it or not. And I do feel that as many points of view as possible ought to be represented. So I hope that answers the question.
I think you just kind of answered the next question, but I want to make sure. William Welch says, do you work to assure the ratio of Republicans versus Dem letters reflects your readership, or is it based on letters you receive? You kind of went over that initially.
Yeah, I cannot tell you, and there's nobody at the Sun Sentinel keeping track of this. If the question is, and I really respect the question very much, if the question is what percentage of your readers are Democrats and what percentage is Republicans, I have no idea except anecdotally. And I can tell you anecdotally, when I say anecdotally, I mean letters to the editor, a second category, which is people who write to me directly who don't want their opinions published in the newspaper. And they'll say at the top, which you have every right to do. Some people write to me anonymously on things, but some people will write and say, I'm giving you my opinion. I do not want this published. But, you know, and the person will give their opinion about something. To answer the question as best I can, I try my level best that what we publish in the newspaper is an accurate reflection of the ratio of what we're receiving. What we're receiving from letters and what the reality is among our readership, I think are probably fairly similar, but I really don't know for sure. I don't know. There's nobody at the Sun Sentinel who says, hey, by the way, you know, 38 Republicans just took out new subscriptions. No one does that. We don't care. You know, I mean, what we care is, you know, what our readers think. I got into a long discussion with a guy in Fort Lauderdale a few months ago. Hey, Steve, he said, I saw your editorial on such and such, and I realize you have to pander to your readership, to the lowest common denominator, and sort of have to play to sort of the Democratic peanut gallery. I said, Bill, if you don't mind, you know, with all due respect, that's not how it works. I said, it may look that way, but I said, speaking for myself as the opinions editor at the Sun Sentinel and my colleagues who are there, we don't write editorials based on what we think our readers will like. We're writing opinions based on what we truly believe. And if there's any ambiguity about that, we've failed miserably. It has nothing to do with, and I mean, we have just written an editorial calling for the governor of this state to suspend and remove from office the sheriff of Broward County, Gregory Tony, who has, it's been amply documented, he has not been truthful. Tony is the first African-American sheriff in Broward County and one of the few in Florida. And he has a lot of supporters, and he won an election in 2020. And he's been elected by the people of Broward County. It's not an easy call to make, but we are going to call them as we see them, whether our readers like it or not. It is never our goal to pander to the readership. But I do understand that, you know, that people will see it that way. Broward and Palm Beach, Broward particularly is, you know, is a unique place in the state because it's so big and so blue and so democratic. Anyway, go ahead, Maureen.
Yes, before I go to the last questions in the queue, we have two last questions. Someone asked earlier if they would have access to this presentation to all members of DWCF, and the answer to that is twofold. First of all, you can go to dwcf.org, and then once you log in under members and under materials, if you scroll down, you'll be able to find the Speakers Bureau, and there's a list of speakers and their topics and their contact information, and the speakers are there. They have been vetted already, and they would be happy to speak to your club via Zoom or perhaps in person if you ask. That's the first thing. The second thing is that President Reedus always puts our webinars on our YouTube channel, Democratic Women's Club of Florida. So that, you know, this presentation will be available there as well. The next question I have here is from Jennifer Cohen. Not a question, but an observation. Have you tried to specifically solicit college students op-eds in the paper? You might get them if you ask for them.
We have, not recently. We have through college newspapers, through law school, you know, law review, law school groups. But yes, that's a good suggestion. We probably should do more of that. Yeah, you know, we're not, you know, we don't assume that that age and intelligence go hand in hand. They might in some cases. They don't in a lot of cases. And so we really want to hear from young people as much as we can. Before we take the next question, Maureen, the point I wanted to make was occasionally, and this maybe will help, maybe it will help your club members understand maybe what we're looking for. I think anything that goes against the grain of conventional thinking is really welcomed and appreciated. We certainly are guilty of conventional wisdom and on occasion, maybe more than occasionally. But a man in Boca Raton wrote a letter to me and said that, he said 4 years, he said, first of all, I'm a no party affiliation voter. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. And he said, I voted for Ron DeSantis 4 years ago, but I have really serious reservations about voting for him this time. And here's why. And he laid out what sounded to me like a well thought out case, whether you agree with him or not. And why that's interesting and why that's important is the fact that, as I'm sure you're well aware, Republicans have overtaken Democrats in voter registration in Florida. And frankly, little by little, both political parties' share of the total base of voters is declining. We are becoming more and more a state of NPA, no party affiliation voters. About 28% of all voters now are NPA. And too little has been done to sort of identify who are they, why are they NPAs. I have a lot of anecdotal information, and most people who register to vote do so at a driver license office, and so they are required, I think by law, the license examiner, hey, Mr. Jones, are you Mrs. Jones, are you registered to vote? No, I just moved down here from Cincinnati. Would you like to register to vote? Yeah, I guess so. Sure. Yeah, I think I should register to vote in Florida. Here's a voter registration application. If you don't check Democrat or Republican, the system registers you as no party affiliation, which makes logical sense. And so anyway, most Democrats and most Republicans are going to vote for their party's choice for a high office. In a close race, the NPAs are pivotal. So, and by the way, with this gentleman from Boca Raton who wrote to me, the first thing I did when I got his letter was I went into the voter registration database just to verify that in fact he's an NPA voter. You'd be surprised, but maybe with no ill intent, a person will say, I'm a lifelong independent. And I check their party affiliation, they're a Democrat, but they said they're an independent. Okay, go figure. Anyway, so we do check that stuff out, but I want to hear people. That's an example of a story told from the heart about somebody who's and why they're thinking the way they are. The most important thing at the moment, I think, right now for the next 7 or 8 weeks, the most important thing in this state is the election, obviously. So, and everything that relates to it. Go ahead, Maureen.
This is the last question from Valerie Brandt Wilson. How does an editor choose the subject of the letter to the editor?
It's based on what is most topical at the moment, usually. And like I said, I spent time yesterday and today, and will maybe tonight or first thing in the morning looking at more of them. It's rare. It is rare that we would get 30, 40, 50 letters on the same topic within like a 48-hour period. But we're getting those kind of letters about these migrant airplane charters. This story has really touched a nerve, at least with our readers, the people who read our newspaper. And so I'm going to give great weight to that because I can tell that even though it's only a tiny fraction of our readership, it is obvious to me that is really the #1 subject on their minds. And I want to put and publicize all points of view. So that's the first thing in terms of deciding what's a letter to the editor. A subject that is a heartfelt expression about something. I think I'm right. I hope I'm right about this. I think September is, I know most of September, more than half of September is gone, but September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Suicide. I think many people, most people have dealt with it in some way in their personal or family life. I hope not, but I think that's probably the case. And so that's a subject right there. That has nothing to do with the election, nothing to do with what's happening in Washington this week. That is a enduring subject that will never go away. I am very interested in that subject and what people think about that. Highway safety, traffic, air quality, the environment, the toxic algae blooms. I could go on for 20 minutes. Anything and everything is interesting to us and is something I want to inform our readers about. So.
Well, I did get one additional question from Gillian Kraft. Should either a letter to the editor or an op-ed include a heading or a title?
Yes, it should. And thanks for bringing that up. And shame on me for not mentioning this earlier. The op-ed should be sort of, we may not use it, but it will show me that you focus the mind on it. Give your own work product a 3 or 4 word headline. Why such and such still matters. That kind of thing. And in addition to the 600 to 750 word suggestion or criteria, the author should submit a color high resolution headshot of themselves. Just with an iPhone, just a picture of the author. We generally put the author's photograph in the newspaper, and a one sentence description of the author. John Doe is executive director of, the Citizens Alliance of Lantana, or is a retired attorney living in Palm Beach Gardens, period. That's all we need. Name and hometown and any brief professional background. So, but yeah, it's good to what generally happens with me is somebody will write a quick email and say, I would like to write an op-ed on the fact that, I think term limits for elected officials have been a disastrous mistake. And I've got 3 or 4 good examples of what I'm talking about. Would you consider publishing an op-ed about that? And the answer is, of course, absolutely. Is it going to change anything? Not likely, because term limits are in the Florida Constitution, and it's really hard to get them out of there once they're in there, or to change them. But that's beside the point in a way. This is a topic that is on a lot of people's minds. It's had a major effect, in my opinion, a major negative effect on the quality of the people elected to public service in the state. In fact, it's had a disastrous impact, really. The old system had many, many flaws and was far from perfect, but this was not an improvement. And so anyway, that's an example of something that we'd love to get an op-ed piece on. Again, it's not tied to the election, but it's an enduring subject that's going to be with us for a long, long time.
Thank you, Steve. That indeed was the final question. Thanks so much. The DWCF members certainly will use all this information. We are honored to have you and here to share your expertise with us. At this time, we'll be turning the webinar over to Jean Speranza, who will be administering a short survey to our attendees. She'll be sharing the survey results of the poll with attendees. And then after that, Jean will turn the screen over to President Reedus for closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Okay, Maureen, thanks for having me very much. Enjoyed being with you all. Thanks.
Thanks, Maureen. I'm going to bring up a 2-question poll. If you can please just quickly answer the 2 questions. I'll give you everybody about a minute or 2. Any feedback you have would help us going forward. I'll give it another minute or 2. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm sharing the results really quickly, and it seems that everybody's enjoyed the presentation, so that's all good. Thank you, I appreciate it. Back to you, Monica.
Thank you so much, Jean. Thank you, Chair McKenna. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. This has been an exceptional bit of information. We know that this is something that we've been talking about for a long, long time, trying to figure out how we could do some training on writing letters to the editor. And I think that Steve Bousquet did a fantastic job this evening and gave us some really good information. And again, if everyone would really take this work to heart and start penning some of these letters as we go into elections and these ballots start getting distributed, this is only going to help educate the public at large. So instead of letting the news, the television stations of the right-leaning media inform folks, let's talk about what really is going on in Tallahassee and what's going on under DeSantis's leadership. I also want to mention that, like I mentioned earlier, that the training committee has done a phenomenal job, and they have trainings that are laid out literally all the way through next year, almost monthly. But I wanted to let you know about, we have 2 coming up, but the very first one is going to be with Mary E. Atkins, who is a professor of law at Levin College. She's an author, and she's a Florida Constitution specialist. And she's going to speak with us on October 2nd at 7 p.m. By the way, it's another Sunday. But she's going to talk with us about ET, 7 p.m. ET. She's going to talk with us about the judges. And the importance of getting it right, and how we do figure out who are the judges that we really need to have in place, because we do know that that under Republican leadership, we've had a lot of ultra conservative, uber conservative judges put in place. And those judges are making some really bad calls on some legislation. So we're going to find out what exactly we need to do to make sure that our law is free and equal and just for all Floridians. So if you could join us on Sunday, October 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern for this training, it will be a really good opportunity for all of us to get our arms wrapped around this, because we all know that come election time, everybody's running around saying, who are these folks? So let's do what we can to have the right answers and get this figured out. But again, I want to thank you, Maureen, Jean, as always. Thank you so much for conducting another exceptional event. We appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to the next time that the training committee, they're really bringing it forward. And I appreciate you guys so very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're ending up the webinar. So thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.